Hey Mojoholics, I'm Rebecca Brayton and welcome to Mojo at the Movies. With me as always is resident movie reviewer Eric Cohen, who is here to tell us about 3 movies that may surprise you at the Oscars this year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this year's Oscars, if you think about it, the landscape, there's a couple of big obvious ones, right? The Post.
Yeah. That movie seemed like they just took okay, let's get Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, Steven Spielberg, and
just
a really good
historical
again, then give them all the Oscars.
There's Dunkirk, which, I mean, technically speaking is probably the one that's going to clean up, with all the technical awards and stuff. But then the rest of the landscape, it's stuff like 3 Billboards, which is my personal favorite of the year. There's Lady Bird and Get Out, Shape of Water. But there's 3 movies that have been kind of released in limited cities and now are just attaining wide release this week. So we're talking about Hostiles, starring Christian Bale. It's a Western. We're talking about Phantom Thread, the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and we're talking about I, Tonya, which a lot of people seem to be talking about.
Yes, I have heard a lot about that. So let's start with Hostiles.
Hostiles. So I saw this movie yesterday. This is it's a movie by Scott Cooper, who he did Black Mass, he did Out of the Furnace, and Crazy Heart. And this is a Western, I guess a revisionist history Western, where Christian Bale plays a captain, an army captain in the late 1800s. And he's stationed in New Mexico, and he's tasked with bringing a Cheyenne chief back to his homeland, a guy who was imprisoned with his family for a long time, and the president of the United States decrees that he should be returned to his homeland to live out his last days. And Christian Bale's character is tasked with doing this, and he wants nothing to do with it because he spent his entire life and career basically fighting against the natives, which he referred to as savages, and saying that killing them was his job. And so, there's a lot of hatred on both sides. And a lot of brutality in this movie. It starts with just the most intense scene of violence, and you're just, like the movie starts and you're just kind of like this, and you spend the rest of the movie just kind of, slowly coming out of your shell, and then something else brutal happens and you go back into it. So it's, I don't like Westerns very much. We even did a list recently about movie genres that have died out, and Westerns was on there.
Okay, fair enough.
But, I mean, that's not to say that there are not some good Westerns, and this is an example of a great Western. I was riveted. The entire movie, it's about revenge, but it's also about redemption. And so the relationships, certain people who hate each other turn into... their relationship turns at one point during the movie, and I believed it the whole way through. Christian Bale might get nominated for Best Actor.
Steep competition.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to win, but because, I mean, if you look at who he would be up against.
Yeah, the Golden Globes Best Actor category was stacked.
Yeah, and Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, chances of, maybe, can he make it 4?
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that later.
We'll get there.
So this is a very good movie. The cinematography is absolutely stunning. I mean, when you have a setting like the plains and, the Rockies and just, the life in Montana and New Mexico in the 1800s, it's just, the backdrop is actually, it's stupendous. And so for someone who doesn't necessarily like long Westerns, I thought this was a great movie.
Well, it's really all about the story. The genre is more window dressing, right?
Yeah, and it's all about the performance. And so Rosamund Pike is also in this movie. She does a great job of just a woman who's, I mean, the things that happen to her along the way are just so awful. You can't even imagine having to bear all the things that she went through. And so she might actually get Best Supporting Actress as well.
Which Oscars do you think this will be nominated for?
I think it's likely to get Best Picture. It might get Best Director, and I think for Actor and maybe Supporting Actress.
Okay, so we alluded to the next one earlier. It is Phantom Thread.
Phantom Thread, not the Phantom Thread.
Fine. Or the Phantom Menace.
Or the Phantom Menace. This is the new movie from Paul Thomas Anderson, who's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. This is the guy who did Boogie Nights, Magnolia, one of my personal favorites ever, There Will Be Blood. The Master, and so this is a movie that he's made about a dressmaker in 1950s London. And you would think, this is not, this is a far cry from Boogie Nights, but every time he approaches a film, it's always kind of a film of a different genre and set in a different time and place, and he always gives it that touch. But, again, I should mention, Daniel Day-Lewis is the main actor here.
That is the main draw here.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis.
And it's his last film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's pulling a Michael Jordan and saying, I'm never coming back, but he's probably going to come back. And also Paul Thomas Anderson has said, both of them were so tired from production of this movie that Paul Thomas Anderson has said that he's thinking of at least scaling back when it comes to his filmmaking. So I don't know what happened on set here, but it's not a movie, again, like Hostiles, it's not a movie I was expecting to like. But it is twisted, and it's not overtly twisted. It's just as you get into this movie, you kind of discover more and more how twisted it gets. It's, as I mentioned, about a dressmaker, and he finds a muse, this younger woman who kind of disrupts his life. And that's something, actually, that is common in all of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, is these kind of older people who are set in their ways, whose lives are disrupted by this younger force that kind of wants to change things. And I have to say, I mean, it's sumptuous. Like when you watch it, the sights and the sounds, and I'm not into dresses. I'm not even into fashion that much, as you can see. But something about this movie just put me in the perfect headspace for that. And my mom, who's actually she used to be a psychologist, came out of it and said there is so much to chew on there. There's so much to think about. So it's a lot about codependence between Daniel Day-Lewis's character and his sister and his muse. And I don't want to give anything away, but it is, if you like.
Doesn't, when you tell me the premise, it doesn't sound like a movie that's going to be interesting or have twists.
It does, and that's just the point, is that it's not like a roller coaster ride. The twist is more like a slow bend, that once you get around the other side, near the end, you're like, whoa, how did we end up here? I don't want to give away too much, and it's not necessarily the most Mojo movie I've seen all year, but I do think it's definitely going to bag an Oscar nomination, if not a win for Daniel Day-Lewis, possibly for Paul Thomas Anderson.
He didn't win the Golden Globe.
No, he didn't. Again, stiff competition, and I think Gary Oldman. That's going to be pretty tough. But this is also for production design and maybe cinematography. So it'll be interesting to see.
So the third and final movie is I, Tonya, which did make a splash at the Golden Globes.
Oh, it did, especially when Tonya Harding showed up.
Right.
So this is the movie about Tonya Harding, figure skater, Olympian who in the 90s was involved in that terrible scandal where her opponent or competitor, Nancy Kerrigan, got her knee smashed. Teammate, in fact, and former roommate, got her knee smashed in. The details are covered in this movie, and so it's a biopic. It's directed by Craig Gillespie, who is not, here's a guy who did Fright Night. He did
the remake.
Yeah.
Okay.
He did $1 Million Arm, the Disney movie starring John Hamm, and Lars and the Real Girl. So really a wide variety of stylistic variances. And here he is doing I, Tonya, which one of my colleagues, or our colleagues, described it as if the Coen brothers did a biopic and Scorsese did a comedy. So, right there, that was enough to sell me on the movie, and she was right. I mean, it's just in its choice of framing, and especially the use of music, it felt a lot like a Martin Scorsese film. It was not what you would expect from a biopic because it's so stylistic, and
But is it a straight biopic? Like, does it?
Not really. I mean, it's it certainly plays with conventions, and it's kind of based on a bunch of archival interviews with some of the major characters in the film. But the way the filmmakers choose to make a statement,
It sounds almost more like a documentary, almost.
Well, no,
but that's not what I mean. In terms of, maybe not a documentary, but in terms of they're trying to guide you into a
absolutely.
point.
And I mean, we have to mention Margot Robbie playing
Right.
Tonya Harding. She does such a good job. She was almost unrecognizable. Certainly didn't have the glamour girl look that we're used to in her other movies. She really played up the white trash aspect brilliantly. And
No disrespect.
no, admittedly, I mean, she talks about how she's white trash, and her mom, played by Allison Janney, that is, for me, that's a clear-cut winner in the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. She had a hard life, Tonya Harding, and she didn't have it easy, and I think the movie makes us understand that even if you're an Olympian, life is not all, it's not a charmed life. Things can be really difficult. As to her involvement in what happened with Nancy Kerrigan, the jury's out. The filmmakers kind of show that she didn't know, but she kind of knew what was going on, but she wasn't really in control. I would have liked to see the Nancy Kerrigan story. I think maybe that's what we should be seeing next. But I think this could be up
maybe
there.
it's not as interesting from a storytelling standpoint.
No, exactly. She was a bit more of a vanilla character than Tonya Harding. I think this will be nominated for, like I said, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, possibly Direction, and likely Best Film.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we saved the best for last.
But I think, if I may, 3 Billboards is still the clear-cut winner. I think that's going to clean up at the Oscars. I guess we'll see.
Okay, so you guys have got a lot of movies to see before Oscars season, so let's get to that. See you next time.
America. They want someone to love, but they want someone to hate. I mean, come on. What kind of friggin' person bashes in their friend's knee? Who would do that to a friend?
Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and subscribe for new videos every day.